60. It can do 60 plus.
In today's video, I'm going to be swapping my Luckeep M5 Max over to 72 volt.
I'm going to be using this battery from my Razer. It's 72 volts, 24 amp hours, along with this NB Power 205, that's 5,000 watt nominal, and a Fardriver ND 72450. We're also going to be using the stock suspension and wheel from my Contoler XXX instead of the 20x4 wheel that came with this bike originally.
The first thing that I need to do is take this thing apart. I got the battery and remove the old controller.
This video is going to be broken down into 3 different parts, all with timestamps. The first part is going to be me building this bike. The second part is me testing it with just a single battery at 100 amps. And then the last part will be with both batteries at 150 amp line, 450 amps phase, which is 10,800 watts. But all the timestamps will be linked below. Now let's get started building this thing. First things first, let's remove the battery. And then we're removing the left side cover, which is just held on with 5 bolts, and that will reveal the controller.
Stock, the controller does not come mounted like this. I added these zip ties to hold it up because it was rattling a little bit. But the next thing we need to do is remove these 4.
Most of the connections are hidden behind the right side cover.
With both of the covers off, we can take a look at how this thing is set up. So we have our controller here. We can see all of our connections here. Pull off that plate. We can see that our battery is connected by XT60. This is a pretty standard e-bike connection. So if you wanted to swap out the controller, it would not be very hard on this.
Here I'm unplugging all the electronics because we are replacing every single part of the electrical system on this bike. We're moving up to the handlebars to unplug the brake sensors, the throttle, as well as the display and switch. Moving under the bike, we're going to cut these zip ties and then unplug the rear hub motor. I tied this string to the motor wire, that way I can fish something back through easier with it. Next, the battery holder is coming off of the frame.
I'm not sure if I need to remove this top cover, but I'm just going to do this so I can start to get an idea of where I want to put the controller.
I'm also going to remove this bottom basket so I have a little bit more room in the frame.
So I've come up with a design for mounting the controller. I'm going to be using this bracket that was originally mounted in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take it and it's going to sit something like this. This is going to sit sandwiched between this plastic bit and the frame. And it's going to use these metal tabs on top as well as here into this to hold the controller on. It's going to sit in here with an additional bolt going through the plastic, just something like that.
I'll have a link to this 3M tape along with all the other parts in the description of this video.
So it's going on like this. And I'm gonna line this bracket basically with that. And we're gonna press on. As you can see, that's pretty strongly on there. Then we're gonna take 2 more pieces and put them on these tabs.
These will help later to hold it onto the frame of the bike.
All right, before we put this onto the bike, I'm gonna drill 2 holes and mount the controller to this assembly. Now I just gotta mount the controller inside. I drilled these 2 holes, you can see those from the inside. Bolt 1. Got that through. Just start the nut so that we don't lose placement. Bolt number 2. And let me go grab some tools to tighten this down. In final assembly, I did swap these bolts around to have the bolt head on the outside. I ended up cutting this hole bigger with a Dremel. It's not the prettiest cut, but it should allow us to plug the harness in and feed all of our connectors through here. Now all of those are fed through here. We can take the harness connector and plug this in. There we go. Connector is plugged in. Put that back over. Now all of our cables are going to come out of here. Before I install the new controller, I want to remove all of the old electronics from the handlebars and replace them with the electronics from my Razor, because that's what I stole all these parts off of. I could not get this other grip off for the life of me, so I cut it off since I have other ones I can replace it with on hand. And off comes the rest of the stock electronics. The left side is getting the volt switch with keyed ignition along with the 3-speed selector and then a mountain bike grip. And we can't forget my favorite mirror. I'll have this thing linked below as well. Next, we're feeding all of the wires from our new accessories into the center part where the old controller used to live. Now we have our throttle, our 3-speed and ignition and voltmeter running down through the front, down into this gap, which comes about back here. And I ran the lines up into this hole right here, which comes out in the top through here. And then I just have the Fardriver, which I mounted to the battery cover. This wire is our throttle. It is going to connect to the black, green, and red from the controller. And then these are what come off of the ignition and voltmeter. The orange one is going to go over to the controller, and then this red one goes to the orange, and then the blue goes to this, which is our 3-speed. Please note I do not have the motor hooked up to this at this time because I'm still waiting for my tire to come in tomorrow. I gotta mount that before I can mount the motor. But for now, let's get this into there. Now we just have to slide this whole assembly in here. Gonna be careful to make sure that all my wires go into this cavity in front. I'm going slow and careful installing this part because I don't want the wires that are coming out of the plastic box to get pinched between it and the frame of the bike. And that's gonna sit in there just like that. Then we'll have 6 bolts that hold this on, and this should be pretty rock solid. Time to reinstall these 6 bolts, and then we can move on. Now I'm taking off the rear seat because I'm gonna rewrap this with a new seat cover. I'm not gonna show you how to do it in this video, but check this link to my guide to making your own seat. So this build guide isn't going to be as detailed as they normally are on my channel because I was trying to get this bike ready for the Boston trip, so I rushed building it and didn't film a lot of it. But I'm going to walk you through everything that I did anyways because it's really not that complicated. Let's get into it. Starting off with the front end, you will notice that we are now using a whole new front shock and front wheel. These are both takeoff parts from my Talaria XXX because I upgraded the suspension and front wheel on that. I do have a guide, so I'll have that linked if you want to see how to swap out the front suspension. It's basically the same on all e-bikes and e-motos. But this is a D&M front shock. I am using the front fender. I just had to bend the back piece to screw into here. And I also did have to cut off the stopper on this fork because it would hit on here and limit it too much. We also have a 17-inch front wheel from the Talaria XXX. It is using a 220mm brake rotor,
and the stock brake from the M5 Max bolts straight up to this and is functional. Moving on to the center, you may be looking at this and going, man, that looks really complicated, but I'm going to show you how I did this. So let me take this apart and then I will assemble it back together and explain all of the steps. Alright, with the batteries out of the way, I can show you more easily what I did. This stuff is ABS plastic that I bought on Amazon, and it's super easy to work with. You basically just heat it up with a heat gun and you can bend it. You can cut it with like a hacksaw, you can score it with a razor blade and it just snaps. But I made this to tightly fit my battery inside. This will just slot right into here like that, like a glove. And it's so tight that this will not just fall off. Now this whole assembly sits inside of here. So we have 4 bolts holding this onto the frame. This is the same thing, just kind of cut, and then you can weld it back together with a soldering iron if you do choose. I did reinforce this with 3 layers of ABS, so this is super strong. And this was the first mount that I built. So in the testing, you'll see that I had this on for the first riding test with the single battery. Then afterwards, I added this second mount, which just bolts in with 2 of those. And it's a little bit smaller. Like this, it wiggles around. But with the battery straps, it holds it on tight. Moving over to the controller, you see we have our 2 leads coming back up here, and they are plugging into the QS8 connection for my dual battery 150 amp discharge balancer. So that has 2 leads that come down here that will connect to our 2 batteries. This stops one battery from discharging into the other battery if they are imbalanced. It's a lot safer to run one of these, but you cannot run regen if you are running this. You'll also notice that my seat is now styled like a cafe racer. This is actually a stock seat. I had bought a replacement that did not fit very well, so I ended up taking the cover off and taking a little bit of the foam. That way I could modify this one to work well. It's far from perfect, but it completes the look for me. Moving over to the back wheel, you will see that we have a Shinko 241 that is stretched onto this 20x4 wheel. This is a 16x3. It was a royal pain to get this mounted, but we have it on here, so we're running the same tire on the rear as well as the front. You'll also notice that I'm still using the stock derailleur. That's just to keep chain tension since I haven't messed around with that at all. To remove the rear wheel, it's fairly easy. You just undo these 2 bolts, and then you undo these 2 bolts, and the whole thing dropped out of the bottom. This new wheel goes in exactly the same way the old one came out. The main spot of trouble I ran into was this brake assembly. So I had to use a 4mm spacer, which is that silver disc in there, to get enough clearance for the stock brake caliper to clear the motor. And then this still wasn't aligned, so I also had to use some additional washers to space this out. It's not perfect. I would like to make this better, but that's what we're gonna have to run with for now, and I haven't had any issues. I also noticed that these bolts were rubbing on this disc that protects the wire that comes out, but I was told by many people in the community that is very normal and not to worry about that as long as your wire is staying out of the way of these bolts that spin, which it is. And you can see I just ran this wire down under, around the back here. We have plenty of clearance. And then it just follows the swing arm up over to our Fardriver controller. And since the stock lights are not currently wired in, that is something I'm going to be adding in the near future. We just have this running light that blinks, and when you and when it senses the G-forces of slowing down, it does illuminate. And like the rear, the front headlight is not wired, so we have this rechargeable one that is very bright. Up here on the stem, we have a stem lock. So that goes through the top and connects all the way into the bottom to hold your steering tight together. And I also switched to direct mount handlebars instead of one that mounts to the stem. I'll have affordable options for those linked down below, but I did seal this one off of my Talaria, even though I do have a part I'm going to replace this with permanently for this bike so that can go back to the Talaria. So I'm going to put this thing back together. You'll notice that the batteries are not easy to get in and out, and that is on purpose. If I lock this thing outside somewhere to like go get food or something, I don't want someone to easily be able to just take off my 72-volt batteries. So let me show you how these go in. Step one is my extra battery sleeve. Slides in, and it actually kind of like pops into place because I formed this around this. Next up, this battery slides in like this. It just kind of barely fits. And that slides into place like that. Next up, this battery. Then this should, in theory, and you'll notice that my big battery does use QS8 connector by standard, but this battery is using XT90. So I made this adapter from XT90 to QS8. Don't mind the tape. The housing just didn't sit on completely flush, and I just wanted it to be a little bit more protected. So to wire this bike up, we just need to plug this into here. And then we have our 2 discharge cables. So this top one is going to go to this one. And then this one is going to go to this one. Just like that. And then I have a cable tie, a Velcro cable tie, attached to this. That way we can go like this and bundle these all together. And look at that. Those are all on. Now we just have to add our Velcro straps to make it so we have a little bit less lateral flex. And now we just strap down our batteries. This just adds a little bit of extra strength, holding it onto the frame like this. So. All right, we'll tighten that one back on and better in a second. Pull it tight, Velcro it on. And now you can see that wiggles way less. You can see that already locked up this a lot more. And then for safety reasons, I decided to add one more down here. As you can see now, with the 4 straps on, 2 on the back, 2 on the front, if we try to wiggle the batteries, they are firmly secured to the bike. Not really worried about those coming off, and ABS is super impact resistant, so if we do crash this bike, this will hopefully protect our batteries. All right, boys, we are out on the 72-volt M5 Max to give it a real first test ride. I did do a couple miles just to make sure everything seemed to be okay, and it was, so here we go. As you can see, this thing's already got a shit ton more power than it did before. So we are topping out at 57. Well, at least we were yesterday. So right now we have this thing tuned for 100 amps line and 400 amps phase. The motor that we swapped to is a 5,000 watt nominal 3.5T windings with 50H magnets. But so far, I am super happy with this build. I know that I can turn this thing up. 60 miles an hour should be fairly easy for this bike to achieve. We will probably need to increase the cooling of this bike to be able to push that continuously. But just to give you guys an idea of the difference between this, see, we're chilling at 30. We're just going to hold it down, pinned. And you can see that we are climbing fast up this hill. We're doing 50 straight up a steep incline. The cameras never really show how steep this stuff is, but trust me, this is quite the hill. When this thing was stock, we were struggling at like almost 15 miles an hour back there, where we were hitting 50 on this newly upgraded version. So far we started at 82 volts. We are currently sitting at 79. Okay, let's see what it comes back up to. 79.4, and we have done 3 miles with an average of 30 miles an hour with a top speed of 56. So we are burning through the battery fairly quick. I just want to double check that my wire is staying out of the way of this because it has very tight clearances, which it is. Very good. Everything's checking out. We can continue going. The stock lights aren't wired in yet, so I have some alternatives just so we have a little bit of visibility. I will say my new forks do limit the turning radius of this bike a bit, but not too much. And we're going to pin it so you can see the acceleration of this thing. Yeah, much faster. I am very happy with the way this bike handles and feels. Handling feels good. We'll do a little bit of dirt riding. Why not? Just see what it feels like, you know? We are running a whole different front wheel and suspension, so maybe it will help. Maybe not. I don't know. Let's find out. All right. We're going to try and launch this thing. Yeah, I don't think this thing will power wheelie me at the power levels that I have it. And also because I have this thing more so set up for a speed motor. 3.5T will give us higher top speed versus a 5T winding, which will give us more torque and less top speed. But for me, I really like usable power. I'm not really that interested in having the fastest bike or the craziest accelerating bike. I just want a level of performance that I find fun and manageable. All Alright, let's give this thing a little try in the dirt. Yeah, it is a little bit more manageable, but this is definitely more of a street-optimized vehicle. But we do have good traction on the dirt. It just doesn't feel as confidence-inspiring as something like my Talaria does. But yeah, it really has no problem doing this. I could go faster, but I don't really want to at the moment. Yeah, I think that's plenty of dirt riding for this bike. We are going to whip it around and bring it back onto the street. Yeah, it's a little bit rougher than I want to deal with. Doesn't look like it on camera, but you can feel it because this is such a hard packed surface. And it's got all these little rocks on top that are kind of loose. A little sketchy for riding. Not bad. I don't mind it, but this isn't the bike for it. Ooh, yeah. The rear suspension sucks on this bike. It's definitely getting upgraded at some point. It's fine from the street. It does add a little bit, but nothing meaningful. Yeah, we're definitely going to tune this thing up a bit. This thing is still super nimble, which I appreciate. I can kind of keep this thing tuned more optimized for street riding, and I can have my Talaria more set up for trail, which is kind of cool. I like having the ability to have both of them set up for different things. It's a Luckeep M5 Max, but 72 volt swapped.
Is it bad?
Yeah.
My boy got a 72 volt Razor.
Yeah, I actually stole the battery and controller off my 72 volt Razor.
Hell yeah. That thing's sick.
Thank you. I'm at like half battery right now too, so it's dropping a little bit, but.
Go for like the same as like a Talaria or something?
So right now this is 72 volt, 100 amps, so that's 7,200.
Bro, I'll catch you later.
All right, peace out, man. Okay, we now have both batteries mounted to this thing. We're going to be testing how this 150 amp dual discharge equalizer holds up with both my batteries mounted. We now have 39 amp hours of battery. I'm just going to swap out my iPhone, which I was using to tune the bike, over to my normal phone for GPS. Make sure my lights are going, and let's go take this thing for a ride. This thing is super fast now, easily cruising at 40, easily hitting 50. This thing's fast. I think we're gonna get way less voltage sag now that we have these two batteries, even though this is a very, very power hungry motor. Yeah, GPS is accurate with the Speedo. We are gonna take a trip up the hill. We will time it, but this isn't gonna be flat out just because this bike is way too fast for that. So we start on the line. Start. As you can see, if we twist it, this thing's got absolutely no problems hauling up to that 50 mile an hour mark, even while ripping up this hill. Holy shit. Dude, this thing is quite fast. And at the top of the hill, we are going to go check and see if anything it feels like it's running super hot. But look at this thing. We're easily able to do over 50 miles an hour up this. I'm like probably about 40% throttle. If I pin it down, like, you can see it. Even at the steepest parts, we can accelerate quite hard. So yes, climbing up a hill like that, I believe it's about 800 feet in elevation that we just did right there. So we're gonna pull off here and we're gonna touch the motor and see how it feels at the moment. Turn it off just in case. Dude, this thing's barely even warm after pushing that much power up the hill. We are good. We are running 150 amp line, 450 amp phase on this bike right now with my 72 volt, 24 amp hour, 150 amp max battery, along with my 72 volt, 15 amp hour, 80 amp max. So we're gonna whip this around. We're gonna go for a little bit further. Mostly street riding, because this thing doesn't really have the suspension for trails. Whip this thing around. All right. This thing's got quite a lot of torque. It's definitely, this thing's probably faster than my Talaria at the moment. It is higher voltage and pulling significantly more power. Even though this is a hub motor, that doesn't detract from the fact that this thing goes fast. It also has no problems chilling at 30 miles an hour. With this big motor and these two batteries, we have increased the weight of this bike by a lot. I have not weighed it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that this thing weighs in the 200-pound area. Maybe a little bit less, but I wouldn't be surprised if I put it on a scale and it said 200 pounds. So hopefully I'll remember to add that. It can do 60 plus. That's all I care about. I don't really care about going any faster than 60, but that is the top speed I was looking for out of this bike, and we should have a good amount of range with this amount of power. We are currently sitting at 80 volts after starting at about 83.6. We've done 3 miles, but we have been giving it a lot of juice. And I still am retaining my pedals, even though they are not wired to anything, and the gears ratio is not even close to being useful at the speeds that you ride this bike at. But that's okay. We're probably going to be replacing the pedals with pegs, because this is definitely an e-moto now. This is no longer an e-bike, for sure. I mean, it definitely looks like a motorcycle too. And man, I love this frame design. Look how I can just hug this with my knees and give myself a little bit extra stability. We're going to turn it around here. We are sitting at 81.2 volts. This thing is awesome. I really enjoy the way that this chassis feels. So the back suspension could be a little bit better because it's not adjustable and pretty firm, but that's okay when you are riding on the streets. You don't want a ton of travel, or else the bikes tend to feel more floaty. Dude, this thing is it's such a monster. I'm so happy with the performance on this thing. I think that we can probably get 65, 70 out of this with some tuning wizardry. This thing is perfectly fine at this performance level. I'm just gonna ride this thing around town for fun and bring it to like group rides and stuff. So anything more than this is just unnecessary, and it will burn through our relatively, well, I'd say a medium-sized battery. It's not the biggest battery you've ever seen, but it's definitely not small. I mean, we have more watt hours than my Talaria XXX has, and I often go on 30-mile plus rides on that. So I would imagine that we're going to get 40, 50 miles on throttle out of this bike, I think. And the motor is so quiet, it just makes basically a whirring sound. It's pretty sweet. And again, the brakes are pretty damn good. Like, look at that. And we are just gonna cruise down this hill because this bike is fairly heavy. I don't really want to toast these brakes. Since we are running this dual battery converter, we cannot run regen on this. I'm sure someone smarter than me can explain why, but all I know is I've been told don't enable regen when you are rocking one of those dual discharge balancers. If you are going to swap this much power into your M5 Max, I highly recommend that you swap over to motorcycle tires. That way they can withstand the extra weight and the extra power that you are adding. And now we are back onto the lake route. I like this area. We don't rip through here because this is very residential and quiet, but it is very fun to carve around at lower speeds just because of how curvy it is. And this thing is super nimble and super smooth. Yeah, I'm in love with this bike, guys. This is great. We also haven't burned through very much of our battery despite the higher speeds and the range we've traveled so far, which is now closer to 7 miles. Also, I do have a turn signal kit on the way for this bike. I found one that uses Juliet connectors, so hopefully instead of using the headlight that comes with the kit, I can repurpose the one I already have. But it's all LED and it has indicating lights and stuff, so I'm looking forward to getting that onto the bike. Might be a week or two before you see that, because next week we are going to be rocking the 72-volt Ranger out in Boston. That thing's a very fun bike, and you're definitely going to want to check that out. And you're also going to want to subscribe to my channel if you like bikes like these. But even just riding slow, this thing is feeling great. We're just going to pull off to the side and double check things. Glove off. Motor, how do you feel? A little warm, but not hot. How do my connections feel? They feel cool to the touch. All of them. Batteries? Cold. Cold. Yeah, that's all checking out. Just gonna check my motor wire. Looks good. Make sure I'm still recording. Sure am. Cool. Yeah, but check this thing out. It looks amazing, and it rides amazing too. Definitely one of my favorite builds so far. You can tell it's a little bit DIY, but I personally love the way this thing looks, especially with that Talaria front end. All right. Let's keep it moving. We're still at 81 volts, despite doing almost 8 miles now. So we're going to keep it going for a while longer. And keep in mind, we've been moving pretty quick. My ass. And that's why we wear a full face, because a bug just literally bounced off of my eye shield. And see, around here, people don't really have a problem with e-bikes. No cars coming. This thing is a certified beast. I love it. Overall, I am super happy with the performance I've been able to pull out of this setup on this bike. It handles super well, and it's plenty powerful for most of the roads that I would want to ride on. If you want an M5 Max, check the description down below. Currently, it's $1,500, and you can save $150 with coupon code TTR, bring it to $1,350. The 52-volt version of this bike for that price really isn't bad value. But Luckeep is going to be coming out with their own 72-volt version of this bike, called the Titan. That bike is still in development, but they have been asking me for advice, so I think you guys are really going to like that bike when it comes out. I personally can't wait to get my hands on it, and you're going to want to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss when that video releases. But for now, I'm going to keep putting miles on my 72-volt M5 Max. Thank you for watching to the end of this video, and I will catch you in the next one with the Escape Ranger 72 volt.